So we're looking at the questions for Harrison Bergeron. Our first question would be discuss the character versus society conflict. Now, for this one, I'm wording this like a central idea paragraph. So I have George Bergeron, he would be our protagonist, faces, I might even add that, the story's protagonist faces a conflict with society because the government forces him to wear a debilitating radio transmitter in various ways to hamper his agility and strength. His son was also detained by the handicapper general simply for being strong, gifted, and handsome. The oppressive government passed laws that made it a crime to not wear the assigned handicap. So this is our conflict here. So I could say, thus making George's conflict one with society. I'm kind of restating this because when you have a central idea type question, you want to make sure whoever's grading your work knows you know what the central idea is. And I'm repeating that I'm answering the question. This is about conflict. So I have, then I'm going to add here, because if we think about it, George didn't really notice his conflict. So I'm adding, the government's using the propaganda technique, thus the televisions, to make citizens believe that before the handicaps amendments, it was like a dark age. We're going to assume that's what we would call the propaganda. He has, when he talks about it, he says it was a bad time. And if I was, so Hazel's making these suggestions, and he goes on, she makes a suggest to take off his 47 pounds of Bergshot. So now he's going to say this would be the fine. That can be super devastating to people. And he is also going to call this the Dark Ages. So we know that the people believe that when everyone was competing with each other, that was our dark age. And competition would be as simple as, like, at school, getting a grade on a test. So this tells us a lot. If no one can receive a high score on a test, we could assume there's not much medical or any type of advancements happening in the story, which would be a far different theme than the other stories we'll read. The Big Trip Up Yonder and To Be or Not to Be, where medical advancements are a huge part of the story. In this, the government has basically stifled advancements. Okay, so I also have here an article. Now, I feel like this article could definitely connect to the text. Now, however you would see it connecting, you can rate your paragraph here. For me, I think it's, so this article, right, is about the NFL and how they were using race-based testing. So basically in the NFL, they were doing concussion funds. If a player received concussions and had traumatic brain injuries, they would receive a compensation, because obviously football players on average make around $400,000 a year, and their career span is only about 5 to 7 years. So football players really aren't making that much money unless they're like a household name, right? Think of all the football players that you see on a field that you don't know their names. So basically, it was the NFL using race norming. And what they would do, now it's been taken away. The black players who were victims of this and left out of these settlements, they are going to receive the money now. But here, the vast majority of the league's players, 70% of active players and more than 60% of living retirees are black, so the changes are expected to be significant. No race norms or race demographic estimates, whether black or white, shall be used in the settlement program. So to date, this concussion fund was supposed to pay out a lot, billions. It's only paid out $821 million for brain injuries. Now, the lawyers that represent the black players in this case, they came to find the binary scoring system used in dementia testing, one for black people, one for everyone else, was developed by neurologists in the 1990s as a crude way to factor in a patient's socioeconomic background. Experts say it was never meant to be used to determine payouts in a court settlement. So basically, socioeconomic background, what did your parents do for work? Where did you grow up? What kind of school did you go to? Where did you live? What was the tax bracket? The median income. This is saying that the black players, if they would have came from impoverished backgrounds, would have automatically scored lower on an intelligence test, on cognitive function. So a person's socioeconomic background affected how they were viewed, how smart they were basically, and later after their careers when they took these cognitive tests to receive money because they had brain damage issues, the test would show that they weren't very smart to begin with, so there wasn't much damage to their brain. This was very messed up, and the NFL has been caught for this, obviously, because it's in the article. Now, we can relate, I said, the article relates to the story because both the NFL and the government in the story setting were attempting to create equitable environments. The NFL was using race-based testing and assuming that black football players were cognitively lower functioning than white football players if the black player came from a lower socioeconomic background. So this was an attempt to make sure that concussion funds were distributed equally to those that we could say developed the most, or who, for those that developed, or those that lost brain function while playing for the NFL. However, it ended up being a discriminatory practice. So both the story and the article deal with trying to make things equitable, and in each, it did not work. In the story, the government's effort to make everyone equal causes discomfort, pain, and mental anguish to the citizens. This is similar to the nonfiction article because in an attempt to create equality, the NFL denied black players compensation. I would probably go on to add, the NFL used race-based cognitive testing to deny compensation to black players. And then I might add here a connection to the story. However, the government in the story, in Harrison Bergeron, is most likely creating a society where everyone is too weak or feeble-minded to fight back. Something along those lines. Or to revolt. So I'm comparing the text and the article here. And the next part here, all right, so this would be, what does the story teach readers about individuality? That it's important for a thriving society. Vonnegut uses an oppressive and powerful government to create a setting where everyone is equal, or rather, kept in a constant state of stagnation, both physically and mentally. And then I'll explain here what was going on in our story with some summarizing, and then I will conclude with, this already creates a problem for equality because being equal is about having the same treatment, rights, and opportunities, but by making everyone the same, they are treated unequally. Not only does having sameness treat people unequally, but it also impedes the progress of society. No one will create exceptional music, no one will write best-selling novels, no one will paint exquisite art, and no one will make scientific breakthroughs because everyone is mediocre. And everyone with potential has to wear handicaps, which kills any innovation. And then without unique individuals in society, the world would come to a standstill. So that would be our ending here. But I would actually finish, I might put here, you can keep it as one. So this wouldn't be a new paragraph because we're going on. This already creates problems for equality because being equal, we should say being equal is about having the same treatment, rights, and opportunities. But this would be considered, it's not creating equality. It would be stifling talent. We could say, however, in the story, government is merely stifling talent. That would be what our correct term. So now we have, what is the story's message? You could really say anything you think. Whatever you think, Vonnegut wanted people to think about governments. So for this, I kind of did a pro-government. I said, it teaches the reader that the government can abuse its power under the guise of creating equal rights and opportunities for citizens, but it's always for the betterment of the people. In this story, equality has been achieved, but it's taken so far where people's freedoms of individuality has been taken away. The story's resolution reveals why the government was forced into making the choices that it did when a deranged young person tries to end democracy. I'm talking about Harrison here. So in this, I'm using the evidence from the text. I'm going to say, the short story Harrison Bergeron shows the reader that a strong government will and should always prevail. The story's main character, Harrison, is strong, handsome, charismatic, and intelligent, so he's imprisoned by government that finds these qualities threatening. As a reader, it was inspiring when Harrison escaped and influenced the other characters to rid themselves of their government handicaps to display their talents. However, Harrison's rhetoric regarding becoming an emperor and handing out feudal land rolls to those around him shows that he may not have been the savior that this society was seeking. And then I'm going to say here how it was probably a good thing that the government stepped in and took care of Harrison. So I would say this story, we could say in the story is achieved. I want to say something as to why. I might add something to that in between. So I could say, in the end, I'll say in the story's resolution, Harrison is no match for the government because Diana Moon Glampers enters the studio with a shotgun. The power of an authoritarian regime defeated Harrison and killed those that supported him, proving to readers that there is no hope in fighting established oppressive governments. And we could also say, let's say for the government, because Diana Groom Glampers, the handicapper general, I didn't exactly explain this. If this would have been a full essay, I obviously would have a introduction paragraph. But then we could add, I might say, readers are left with a feeling of satisfaction that a rogue citizen is not able to step in and coup the entire government system. So in this one, we're saying, and I'm going back to what I said here, we have, in this story, equality has been achieved, but it's taken so far where people's freedom of individuality has been taken away. I could say people's freedom of expression, because that's really what expression and talent. We could say the story's resolution reveals why the government was forced into making the choices it did when a deranged young person tried to end democracy. And then we can add here, developing the central idea that governments will sometimes act harshly in order to keep public order. And this obviously would be not the central idea that people would be thinking you would see, because it was a story about government control that was scary, right? But I'm using evidence from the text to say, no, this is a positive government story. And that's kind of how literature can be, as long as you're taking something, evidence from the text. So in this one, I think the rhetoric or the language, the dialogue that Harrison used when he said he was going to be the emperor, that could really go a long way with saying that maybe the government in this story wasn't all the way wrong. But we also don't know. Maybe Harrison was just kidding. But clearly, I don't know if Harrison would have been seen as like a revolutionary savior. He kind of seemed like he had other things he wanted. Very selfish, you could maybe say. Like, he wanted people to dance for him. He wanted to find an empress for himself. We could maybe characterize him as a tyrannical ruler. And in this case, government is ruling. So maybe somebody tyrannical came up, and that's why the handicaps came about. We don't really know.